Welcome to a new Harry's Garage video, and today's car is this Ferrari F430. A real favourite of mine, this one. Came out in 2004 and it was a real step change from the Ferrari 360 that went before it. All sorts of tech on it. It was Ferrari at their peak. Early noughties, they were dominating F1. Introduction of electronic systems were going into their road cars. All sorts of clever trick on this car, which we'll discuss in a bit more detail later. But I particularly wanted to get this example in because this is a manual gearboxed F430 and they're rare things. It's not quite sure how many are actually produced, but around 10% or thereabouts of production. There's around 15,000 in total F430s produced in both Spider and Coupe form. So that makes it around 1,500 cars that were manual, and actually makes it rarer than the Ferrari F430 Scuderia, which is about 1,800 cars in total. So what's a manual like to drive? Well, we'll go into more detail on that, but it's ace. I think it's well worth searching out. Even when it was launched, we called the F430 its limit. This is December 2004 issue of Evo, and we called it Ferrari's baby Enzo. It was a really lovable car. Anyway, let's go and have a look in a bit more detail. I do think it's a good looking car, the F430. It introduced this sort of sharp nose from the previous generation of the F1 cars of the 60s. A really classic look for the intakes at the front, the rads at the front. 19-inch wheels on this. Well, this particular example doesn't have the optional carbon ceramic brakes, steel brakes. They look a little lost, I have to say, in the 19-inch wheels. But they work very well. Looks great in this colour of blue rather than what I might term Ferrari retail red. And then at the rear, well, we got the Enzo lights, the round lights from the Enzo on here on the F430, and also this monster great diffuser. This is the period of Luca Montezemolo in charge at Ferrari, and the one thing he detested was spoilers on the car, rear spoilers. So all it got was a slight lip on that boot lid, and it's just such an elegant look to me. It did actually produce quite a lot of downforce of it, but the CD factor, they say, was identical to the 360, but about 50% more downforce. Just a great looking Ferrari. Okay, let's have a look up the front and at the engine. There's a button here to do the front and a lever there for the engine. One thing I do like about the Ferrari F430 was it was a really practical car. It has an enormous fuel tank. It's 95 litres of fuel this car holds. So it's got proper range. And if I just open this up, that is quite a big hole there. This is the history in this car and the files. Over there I've got a lovely toolkit all strapped up. You didn't get a spare wheel on a Ferrari of this vintage. You got this has just got the foam and the inflator and stuff in there. But actually, that is quite a big space in there. That's your paint code on these cars as well. And then at the rear, oh, just this lovely detail here. This is on the mirror, the F430. Lovely detail on the mirror, just signifying what car this is. This is actually glass. You've got the engine all on show there. You'll look in a moment, it's really set into the chassis, how low down it is. And they sort of shade this glass here so you don't see the sort of ugly bits, which is the air intakes and stuff here. You just see that flash of red. So here is the exhaust, and you've got the intakes here, the water here. Lovely oil cooler. It's dry sump, this car. And just the Ferrari red crackle there with this shield in the middle. Just such a sight, evocative sight. Because it's dry sump, they can mount the engine really low, and you have to look right down there to find the cylinder heads. Really well down in the chassis. That's just to get the weight right down, and then you peer into the inside as well through that glass screen. So yeah, quite a sight. No wonder they put a glass window above it so it's always on show. It's such a good looking engine. Okay, that's the car. Let's take it outside, take it for a drive, because that's what this car is all about. Yeah, nicely trimmed this car. Obviously the crema interior, black dash. I can see this blue stitching to match the exterior colour all on here. Big vents, conventional radio. This is the age before you got the screens. I mean, Ferrari never really did it. They put it into the actual dash here rather than having a separate screen here. Simple heater controls as well. Hurrah! You just twist this and, you know, you put it on auto or fans, etc. A manual gear change in a Ferrari F430. Typical gate, all the same. The aluminium knob on top. These are just the hazards and mirrors and stuff, just the same as on a Ferrari 550 or something like that. But this is the big change. This wheel, one with the starter engine, but two with a little Maranello. We saw it on the Enzo, and here it is on the F430, this introduction where it has, you know, on slippery roads, sport, race or CST, everything off. There is actually a snow position as well. So yeah, that was the big change on the F430, this link of that took over the traction control, the dampers and this E-diff. Anyway, let's get on. Start where you turn the key and press here. A sort of blare from the exhaust. That's sort of typical of the sort of high revving light flywheel V8s of Ferrari now. It's a sort of different sound. This is it in mute because I've got it on. I'll put it into sport. Just, it could only be Ferrari. What a noise. Right, I've got to get a little bit more heat into this. Let's just get this underway. So odd having a clutch and changing gear. Just quickly, the press cars, none of them were manual of the F430s. Ferrari is very keen to push the technology it had at the time, and obviously the F1 gearbox, that was the link to, you know, the F1 program, the change on paddles. They'd speeded it up on the F430 over what was in the F360. So that's what it was all about as far as Ferrari is concerned. The manual, that was old school. Now that's nothing to do with the press cars. Anyway, you'll join me a little bit later on some better roads. The big difference with the F430 was you've got something called Skyhook Dampers, these electrically adjustable dampers that were all linked, sort of controlled by a super brain that could change the sort of damping settings in an instant, depending on the road surface coming towards it. This is an evil bit of road, and instantly I'm just astonished at the ride quality in this F430. At the moment I've got it in wet road just because it's civilised, and I'm just trying to warm up the end where it's warm now. Actually, I might put it just into sport just to go up here, but really was a big change. And there's this very vocal engine, a different sort of sound. It's got valved exhaust on it. It's absolutely standard, this car. That's why I'm so keen to test this one. But here we are in sport, and even there the ride is good. 3,000 RPM dialed up. Lots of bottom end torque as well. 25% more than in the F360. I mean, still 343. I mean, it's a short stroke engine. Its bore is wider than the stroke on the engine. It's built for high revs, this engine, so you don't expect the torque to be high. But with the variable valve timing from the Enzo on this engine, it just is such a clever engine. It maximises everything it can, even though it's got that short stroke, to boost that bottom end torque. Really clever. 4.3 litre. Or you can just cruise in 6, put it on the wet road system, quietens off the exhaust and makes the dampers that a little bit softer. Just lots of moods, whichever mood of Ferrari you fancy is all in control on the Maranello switch on the steering wheel. Everything, it's got the same wheel as on the Enzo. And one thing all road testers used to do, the horn button is there, just where your thumb goes, and you go, oh! Like everybody does it when you first get in from this age of Ferrari. It's so easy just to press it by mistake. But it's got the indicators in the right place. Same indicator stalks as you get on the Ferrari 550 and stuff, and also on your Fiat Punto. But we won't tell anyone that. They work fine. It's nice not to have a cluttered wheel. Wheels fully adjustable. The other thing on the dash, you've got this rev counter loud and proud in the middle. You've got a window in it that would tell you your gear change, what gear you're in, were this an F1. On the manual, it's just blank. It's just a black hole, just a square at the top. Bottom one, you can, it just tells you what mode you got in all the time or whatever. Speedo, 220 mile an hour speedo to the right. So you actually have to watch the speedo on this. The downside is it's it's about a third of the speedo on there is up to 100 miles an hour. So you've got to look at it quite carefully, because it don't half get a move on this car. This car has even got electric seats, and it's quite plush. They do a sport seats, a carbon backed one, but the standard seats like this with electric, really big bolsters on them, and a big favourite of mine. I had them in my 550 Maranello, and it's they're exceptional seats. Front there's a locking glove box, and there's a boat. Not often you see a boat in Burford, but there you go. Good ventilation, full air conditioning, these giant vents on the front, F430 on there. Yeah, really nice place to be, spacious. There's a useful shelf just behind the seats, like on the Testarossa, so you've got added space for extra bags, etc. if you're going away behind the seats as well. So I'm 1000 RPM, 1200 RPM manual, just move away, no problem at all. Beautiful engine, really good. Right, usual sprint up the hill. I'm in second gear, 30 miles an hour, 3,500 RPM. What happens next? This. Just sings. It feels effortless, but it's so Ferrari, there's no mistaking. I think they're wonderful, the way that they just make their cars. You could be blindfolded, have bits on, and you know immediately you're in a Ferrari, and that's what I've always loved about the F430. And it's short geared as well. It's not like unfortunately I've caught up with a lorry, but I can't overtake. Yeah, if I'm in second now, 5,000 RPM, 45, 60 comes up. Yeah, 8.5 is about 70 miles an hour. So you can, but it's just because of that breadth of all those revs, you actually think it's short gears, because you've got so much speed variation in single gears. And it's a quick car, proper quick. I was amazed. We didn't figure one at Evo, but Road and Track did, and they got it to 60 was 3.7, and 100 was 7.9 seconds. Both increments 0.1 of a second quicker than a Ferrari F40. That's the sort of performance you've got in an F430. Spectacular. I mean, the only proviso there is obviously the F40 is manual, and this being a manual won't be quite as quick as that, because the gear change, paddle gear change, is always quicker, but mighty impressive. Oh, it's just the way it revs. So clever. Still one of my favourites. I haven't driven one for about 10 years, but it's lovely to revisit. But again, even in sport, the ride is good. I can go up to race and that just hardens up again. Sport is just a nice compromise for driving on road, is where I'd pitch it. Steering is typically light Ferrari, lighter than you get in some other cars, but easy to read. This was a previous age of hydraulic steering, obviously no electric steering in 2004-5. Just love the simplicity of it, really. I weighed this car as well while I had it in the garage. Came out at 1482 kilos. Slightly heavier than the claim weight. I think they're 1435 kilos, I think, claimed. but then it hasn't got the ceramic brakes, and it hasn't got sort of carbon backed manual seats, and also it's bung full of fuel at the moment, so the 95 litres, so all those things just pumping it up, but it feels light and athletic out on the road. You don't feel that bulk. Oh, just love the way you just blip it. How lovely is that when you change gear? It just sings. It's a really exciting car. It's sort of, I feel they've sort of slightly disappeared because of 458 came along, and it was such a change of car with the dual clutch gearbox, etc. But the F430 is a magic bit of kit, simpler, dare I say analogue. And anything I used to find with them is they used to ground out. Let's just see for this bump. Oh, it took that okay. Round we go. Little old feisty thing. Feels through there. Yeah, that feels good through there. It sort of dances. F360 never really gelled with it. It felt slightly aloof, didn't quite trust it. This, it's just a step on. Nice thing. So, summarising the F430. What don't I like? I'm really struggling on this one. I was trying to do a list before I set out, and I couldn't really think of anything. I've never quite liked the rear view of the car. I don't think it's as wonderful as the front, but I've actually over the years I like it more than I used to, so that's not really a dislike. Grinding out, I used to ground out suspension. This one doesn't seem to be doing it. It's like they have optimistic bump stops, as though they don't quite know how much suspension travel it is, but this one seems fine on that. The lights, it's much easier to do the lights. One, where's that engine? It was a complete game changer compared to 360. Felt way more powerful. It was 23% more power at 483 horsepower. That is plenty for a road car. Let me tell you, this feels ace down here. Absolutely ace, even though it's just under 500 horsepower. The manual gearbox does bring it alive. It does make it, you do feel connected to this car, but the F1 gearbox was a pretty good effort. I'd never buy a 575 with their F1 gearbox, but on the F430, yeah, no problem at all. And it's just a little bit lean. It hasn't got the grip of today's cars, but it's got the sound. Oh, it's just lovely to revisit. I sort of forgot what I was saying now. Anyway, back on track. Another thing I love about it, the usability. It's a classy Ferrari, this. The way I can turn that exhaust down or I can turn it up. I love the mood changes that the Maranello introduced. The big boot, the big tank, etc. Aircon, all works, carpets. Scuderia is obviously its nemesis. The Scuderia is pretty stripped out. I love them to bits, but to tour in, they're quite hard work. They're rougher riding, just everything turned up to 11. This is very easy to live with, and still pretty flipping mad at the top end. So I love these, and I think for bang for buck, the F430 is a bit of a forgotten hero. 80-90,000 will buy you a nice example. A manual though, if you can find a manual, that adds an extra connection, and I think this will be a very special car. This car sold recently for about 120,000. Hairpin Company had it, did some work on it, around 120. Scuderia is going to cost you 160, 170, so 25% less than a Scuderia, but I've got more involvement, I've got more usability, and a normal F1 gearbox, F430 over Scuderia, 40% discount on the Scuderia. Oh, I'd be mighty tempted with F430. So wow, I've really enjoyed this car. It feels an utter gem with a manual gearbox. If you can search one out, if you like a manual, you're in for an absolute treat. So I think this is a forgotten hero, this car. Bang for buck, off the scale, one of my favourite Ferraris. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, well, keep watching, keep subscribing. Check out Harry's farm as well. Subscribe to that if you will. That would be fantastic, because anyway, there'll be more videos on both channels coming along very soon. Thanks for watching. Oh.